Hello everyone, my name's Sarks, and welcome to the second episode of the first part of our comprehensive Zelda artistic analysis. In this series, I'll be taking you all through the various titles in the Zelda series, and will attempt to draw conclusions based upon the artistic information the developers provided for us. This is one of my favorite franchises of all time, and I hope you'll appreciate the passion I have for this kind of study. If you haven't already, please check out the previous episode first, as I will be covering topics that have foundation in the first episode's analysis. Alright, without further ado, let's get started. So last time I talked about this idea called overarching interpretive synergy. In other words, what are the things that remain basically the same across all interpretations? This concept doesn't just help us pinpoint those consistencies, but it implies that whatever remains consistent is probably the closest to the real thing. Meaning, yes, Link's tunic is based on the overarching synergy of every interpretation, most likely green in reality. Same with the royal family's hair color, same with the line of Demise's reincarnations, and same with the colors and values associated with rupees. This is why the study of artistic interpretations is so darn interesting, because you can actually theorize and speculate on actual narrative content using this method. Like the Rito tribe, for example. In Wind Waker they look like this, and in Breath of the Wild they look like this. Different interpretations, most likely different lore keepers. But one thing remains true. They are a winged, humanoid species that generally enjoy conglomerating in higher elevations. Some of you may be saying to yourselves, well, yes, but Breath of the Wild and Wind Waker are in two separate timelines if you think that Breath of the Wild is in the child timeline. Precisely, you'd be right to say that. And I reply, so what? If there are multiple concurrent timelines, all telling different stories from within the same world, why on earth would that mean that suddenly entire races of people don't exist anymore because of the timeline split? The timeline split is a narrative split. It doesn't erase whole subcultures or locales. By that logic, we can say that the era of decline, the third split, actually contains the Rito as an existing species also. They just aren't relevant to the events that take place in that timeline. I just needed to mention this because for some reason or another, it is deemed a good argument to say, well, the Rito weren't found in any of the child timeline games, so it has to be the adult timeline, which isn't the case at all. But I'm getting off track here, so let's look at how different interpretations from different timelines can be possible in the first place. Well, there are two possibilities. Either, one, there are various lore keepers riddled about, and they all handle the stories they are responsible for telling, serving as witnesses that live among the Hylians, or, two, there are overseers that exist outside of the physical realm, and somehow, through their omnipotence, are able to witness all the events in every single timeline, and are therefore able to craft legends digestible to us. I personally have to say the second option is cool, and does hold definite merit. But the first option has some merit too, as I'll explain. Remember that rant I had about people and locations remaining in existence despite the timeline split? Case in point here, folks. The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventures and the Wind Waker games are in separate timelines, the adult and child. And yet they share the same art direction and stylistic choices across the board. Same lore keeper existing in two separate timelines, thus experiencing two different stories. The original Four Swords is what started the trend, if we want to be technical, but the same art style split into two separate timelines indicates that this same person is just recounting different events through his or her perspective. Now, mind you, the adult timeline lorekeeper certainly must be an old guy, having not only experienced the original Four Swords, but apparently Ocarina of Time, the Great Flood, the events of Wind Waker, the events of Phantom Hourglass, and the events of Spirit Tracks. This really doesn't matter too much, as really lore keepers don't necessarily have to be of human or Hylian descent. They could be those that deal closely with Hyrule, like the Sheikah, the Children of the Forest, or the Great Deku Tree himself, who aren't bound to the same age restrictions that Hylians are. Plus, there isn't ever a real barometer for how old a Hylian can get. I mean, Nico was an adult in Wind Waker, and he showed up still kicking in Spirit Tracks just fine. Perhaps it's the genes? Anyway, whatever the case, it is clear that the same orator is responsible for games that look stylistically identical to one another, so exemplifying the concept that people can exist concurrently throughout every timeline just fine. But this doesn't end here. No, considering this logic, there's one glaringly obvious problem with the hero is defeated and adult timelines. Variety. The adult timeline really has it worse off. What certainly makes an account more credible? Just one person giving his spiel on everything that happened, or multiple accounts from varying sources, all giving generally a continuous story with minor deviations here and there? Well, if you decided the second option, you'd be correct, and that's exactly the problem with these two timelines. They lack variety of sources. The adult timeline literally only has a single art style across all of its games, meaning only one lore keeper was responsible for the entire story beyond Wind Waker. This leaves a lot of room for error, so really we may have very little idea of what truly transpired during that time, unless we get another game in that timeline that confirms these events in one way or another, and has a completely different art direction. The Era of Decline is an improvement to the continuous story, as there can be discerned two different hands within the promotional artwork for those games, that of Zelda 1 and Link's Adventure as one consistent style, and Link to the Past, the Oracle games, and Link's Awakening as yet another. So the Era of Decline oddly holds more credence than the adult timeline, while the child timeline remains to have the most variety out of the three branching paths containing Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, Four Swords Adventures, and Breath of the Wild. This is not to mention, of course, that before the timeline split, there are also three different styles across Skyward Sword, Minish Cap, and Four Swords, and Ocarina of Time. In total, this amounts to about 7 total Hyrule historians, the official lore keepers holding the supposed knowledge concerning the history of the Kingdom of Hyrule. A pretty nice number, if you ask me. I was really considering writing this whole video in order to point out every single deviation among the 7 historians, but really, at this point, I'll give you one huge example and let you do most of the research yourselves. Cracking open my Hyrule Historia along with my arts and artifacts to analyze every minute difference across all styles was such an enriching and fresh experience for me, and it really does open so many doors for the speculative community as to what was, what is, and what may be in the Zelda universe. I wouldn't want to take that experience away from any interested viewers, and I certainly wouldn't want to tell you what to think either. So much individual speculation can be spawned from this method of analysis, and it would be foolish of me to say what is or what is not the case when someone else may have a much better analysis in some areas of study. So I contribute this methodology to the Zelda interpretive community. Study the 7 known historians and discover new potentialities in the Zelda lore by comparing and cross-referencing their work. With the explanation of the method itself out of the way, let's try and apply it somewhere just to leave off for today. Let's see. Here's a juicy one. The ever-elusive Sheikah tribe. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this second episode. It means so much. Sorry, it's kind of technical this time around. This is going to start getting a little bit more interesting in the second part here that's going to be coming up. So in the next part, we're going to be dealing with the Sheikah and all the little secrets that they've been hiding for years directly under our noses that I've discovered. So it'll be a fun time. I hope you can stick around for that. In any case, if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so, you guys. It helps out a lot. And give us a like, give us a share, give us whatever you want to give us. And we shall see ya in the next one. Bye-bye.